Hey, what's up, gamer? Welcome to another episode of the Segaholic. Check it out, one of those Sega Saturns that I got from that Buyee Sega Saturn lot that I got years back has Glitchy RGB video. But first, let me plug another YouTube site, Rocker Gaming. If you like the Segaholic, you'll definitely like Rocker Gaming. But yeah, his channel deserves much more exposure than what it's getting right now. Definitely after you watch this video, check out his YouTube channel. Anyways, while testing composite video comes out clean. And here's what we see from video output coming from the FrameMeister. You can see it's really glitchy, color streaks, and just banding everywhere. Man, you gotta love the VF1 music. Damn, look at that. That's nasty. Man, I wish I could play guitar. And even more nastiness. Keyboards, yeah! Anyways, time for the teardown. You guys know the drill. Take the 5 screws off from the bottom and lift off the top. Now I need to remove the CD drive assembly. First, remove the power cable from the drive PCB. Now remove the ribbon cable from the drive PCB. And don't forget to take off the screw for the ground strap. Now I can finally lift off the whole CD drive assembly. Damn, check out all the dust. Make sure you use an ESD safe brush. To take the cover off, just press these tabs that's on both sides of the cover. The drive assembly used in this particular Saturn is a JVC EXL-P608. And here you can see the 32-pin IC chip. This is the model number and serial tag, and this Saturn was made by Seiyo. Now to remove the power supply, first remove the power button cable. Next, remove these 2 screws in back. Finally, remove this screw here. Now we can remove the power supply board, but make sure to put your fingers underneath the board near the 4 header pins so you don't crack the power supply. Yay, more cleaning! Power supply is a Yamaha model number 35 Mike 10 Juliet. Yay! Even more cleaning! Next, remove this insulator plastic. Now remove the power button screws. Now remove these screws to remove the RF shield. Oops! And finally we can lift the main board off. This one is a VA13. Here's more ID printing. This area here is right behind the 10-pin mini DIN AV jack, and it's here where we're going to start our troubleshooting. To help us map and trace what we was looking at on the main board, we're going to refer to the Sega Saturn repair manual. It should be noted that this is a VA0 PAL Sega Saturn service manual, but the parts of the manual that we're interested in still applies to the VA13. You can get the repair manual from Sega Retro, and I'll leave a link in the video description. This is page 22 of the manual, and here you can see the 10-pin mini DIN connector. We know this is a 10-pin mini DIN connector because we can see the label for power, both audio signals, CSync, the two S video signals, composite video, and RGB. There's an 11th label, but it's not a pinout, which is case ground. You can also identify this part by its label, which is CN5. Now when we search for CN5 from the parts list at the end of the service manual, we see it's indeed a 10-pin mini DIN connector. Now you see here two listings for the same part, but both would be interchangeable. I tried googling the part number, but unfortunately it did not return anything from the search. Now thinking about our RGB problem, it can only be coming from one or a combination of these pins: red, green, blue, CSync, or ground, as these comprise the necessary pins for a proper RGB picture. We can eliminate ground because composite video uses ground also, and the picture was good when using composite video. Now let's backtrack from one of these RGB lines and see what it leads to. In this case, we'll use the red signal. First point it leads to is a fork to TP5, TP5 being short for test point 5. Test points are big empty pads found all over PCBs and are used as an easy way to put test probes on, such as the ones from a multimeter. From there, it leads us to the third leg of EM5. Now checking the parts list, we can see EM5 is an EMI filter by Taiyo Yuden. You might know Taiyo Yuden as former manufacturers of high quality optical disc-based media. The 101 in the part number is probably for a 100 picofarad EMI filter, the 10 for the first two numbers being significant numbers, and a third number being a 1 being the number of zeros that follows. Unfortunately, when searching for the part number, it is not a part that's readily available. From there it leads to CE24, which is a 220 microfarad 4 volt electrolytic capacitor. Notice the polarity markings. The plus and the slash markings down the middle of the symbol would indicate this is a electrolytic capacitor. From there it leads to R36, which is a 75 ohm resistor that is wired in series with CE24. That leads to R out, which is read out on IC21. IC21 has a part number of CXA1645M. This is a Sony RGB encoder, and as you can probably tell, you can see the RGB and sync signals on the inputs. Because composite video was okay when tested, we know everything prior to the RGB encoder are okay also. For those of you who followed the PC Engine RGB adapter build, this area here should look really familiar. In fact, even referencing the PS1 repair that I did a few months back, this type of wiring is pretty common on non-HD video game consoles, where you see a 220 microfarad capacitor wired in series with a 75 ohm resistor and then wired in series to an EMI filter. Anyways, I don't think the problem lies within the RGB lines, but rather within CSync. And because this is the PAL service manual, this leads to 9 volts. And this part of the circuit would not be on our Japanese Saturn. Interestingly, we can see test point 4 is missing. We even see EM4 is missing. But hey, look what we found, test point 4. And we can see test point 4 is connected to CSync. So test point 4 is a test point for clean CSync. And you can see here CSync is filtered before it goes into the RGB encoder. Backtracking to see where CSync is coming from, we can see it leads to this point here. Since there is no dot on this junction, there is really no connection between CSync, red, green, and blue. So these are all really separate lines. But you can see they lead to this point here, which is 13 on this schematic. We pick up the other end of point 13 here on page 16 of the service manual. And that leads us to here, which is pin 86 of this IC. This IC is actually IC14, which is the VDB2 or a video display processor, which is a Yamaha graphics chip. That being said, we know that CSync from this point at least gets to the CSync output at the 10-pin mini-DIN on NTSC consoles. This is really mislabeled, as CSync should be labeled 9 volts for this PAL service manual. Okay, fixed. But what we need to do now is to see if there is an EM4 on our VA13 board. Okay, here's our row of EMI filters. We know that because of the labeling over the top. EM3, EM4, oh wait, here's EM4. This is the EMI filter that's missing from the schematic and from PAL consoles. This is the underside of the board, and notice here a row of test points. The labels for the test points are actually here. We know that because of the brackets and this arrow. So TP4 would actually be here. These 3 column of legs belong to EM4, which I pointed out earlier. Let's zoom in on test point 4. Test point 4 is actually connected to this leg on EM4. And these are connected to this pin on a 10-pin mini-DIN connector. This middle pin for EM4 as well as for all the other EMI filters connect to ground. Now finding a trace leading from this third leg on EM4 is tricky. It's actually on the other side of the board. Here's the trace that leads from the third leg on EM4, and it actually goes in between the legs on these EMI filters. The trace extends to this via right above resistor 17. Now this via does not connect to resistor 17, but actually leads to the other side of the board to this point. From this point, the trace reaches resistor 33 and continues downward. But first, we're gonna check where it goes from resistor 33. The other end of R33 connects to TP105, which in turn is connected to C40, which is connected to ground. We can confirm this part of the circuit with the schematic. Now referencing the schematic, TP105 connects to that via, which should connect to pin 10 on our RGB encoder. Okay, here's the other side of the board, and yups, the via does connect to pin 10 on the RGB encoder. Now going back to that point at R33, you can see the trace leads all the way down to this via. Now the via connects directly to this pin here, which is pin 86 on the VDP2, and this is confirmed by the schematic. Here is pin 81 as shown by the number next to the pin, and we have 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. You can confirm all these connections with your continuity tester on your multimeter. So I confirmed this is what the schematic for an NTSC Saturn should look like. Anyways, the only component on the sync line is the EMI filter, so I'm gonna troubleshoot that. Here we have the Saturn put all back together, and what's connected to the AV out is a custom 8-pin mini-DIN connector that can connect directly to the FrameMeister. I hacked a female 8-pin mini-DIN cable so I could separate the signals and put them on a breadboard. Here's the red, green, blue sync and ground wires coming from the Saturn, and here is the 100 picofarad EMI filter as well as the wires heading out to the FrameMeister. With this setup, you can isolate and test each RGB as well as sync and ground lines. Cool, the noise is gone, and so now we can solder in the new EMI filter for EM4. Son of a you gotta be kidding me. Okay, in the end, I just used Luma for sync. I even tried getting CSync from test point 5, but it wasn't successful. So instead of adding a filter circuit in here, I just saved myself a headache and just took sync from Luma from test point 9. In terms of using the FrameMeister, you really can't tell the difference anyway if you're using CSync or Luma as sync. So yeah, the video came out pretty good. You can see the video quality here. Again, you can't really tell the difference between CSync or Luma when you're using it as sync for RGB. I can't comment on RGB monitors because, well, I don't have one. Okay, this one cleaned up pretty nicely, and this one has been sitting at my desk for about 6 months, and I'm glad that this is finally done. If you're new to the channel, I encourage you guys to leave questions or comments in the comments section here in this video, and I really try to answer each and every one of the comments. As for subscribers, thanks for the continued support. I don't make a dime from YouTube, but I feel it's worth my time to actually share my knowledge. Okay guys, see you guys next time. Aloha.